Well, that's really the big question here. The EU Commission Vice President Margaritis Schinas just said in his press conference now that the Dublin system is being put to bed. It was designed for another era. The Commission's big point here is that in 2015 we were looking at a refugee crisis with a lot of refugees coming into the EU, and the system then was kind of designed in crisis mode. Now the situation is very different. Only 1/3 of the irregular migrants coming into the EU are actually refugees. So they need a new system. Sheena saying that system was another era and now they need a new one. So here's the fundamental change of this new system. The thing they tried to agree before, which they passed by majority vote, was that the burden of hosting the refugees while their asylum claims were being processed would be borne out by all EU member states, that they would be spread out across the bloc. That is fundamentally changing under this reform. Now countries would have the option of either taking in those refugees or sponsoring their repatriation to their country of origin. Now that's because the countries that had voted against that agreement in 2015 actually never followed what was enacted into law. Hungary and Poland, for instance, refused to take any refugees. So this is an attempt to recognize that that existing system wasn't working in practice and to try to assuage the concerns of countries like Hungary and Poland, saying, okay, instead of taking in refugees, you can sponsor their repatriation back to the countries that they came from. So it's going to be a test to see in the coming weeks whether or not this is going to be acceptable to all member countries. There is still some question about actually in the end if, for instance, Hungary or Poland couldn't relocate the refugees they've sponsored within 8 months, then they would have to take that refugee into their country. So the details of this are still being looked at.
You mentioned Hungary and Poland there, Dave. There's also Austria. Sebastian Kurz, very conservative, has voiced his opposition to the plan. 5 years ago, as you mentioned, cooperation failed. What guarantees are there that this time it is going to work if already at its implementation there are so many question marks?
Well, the other big focus here that they're hoping will alleviate the situation is to have a more Europeanized approach here. Frontex, the EU border force, would be given a greater role, and essentially they're looking to normalize the process and end all of the loopholes which allowed people who were claiming asylum to stay well beyond their when their asylum claims were rejected. They want to end the pull for all of the migrant smugglers that are bringing people over to Europe to show, look, there's no more loopholes. If your asylum claim is likely to be rejected, you shouldn't come. And so they're saying, look, this is actually good for migrants as well. This is good for everyone involved. It's having every EU member state take on responsibility in the own way that they want to. So in the cases of those countries in Eastern Europe, not in the way of having to take on refugees, but just sponsoring returns. And it's making clear the rules to the migrants, whether or not they will be able to come in. The Home Affairs Commissioner, Johansson, was keen to stress today that the EU wants migration. It needs migration, but it needs regular migration, and it needs to make the process clear to people who want to immigrate to the EU. Right now, the process is not clear. Vice President Schinas called it a non-system, what's in place at the moment, because that agreement in 2015 just hasn't been working. So this is a second try, if you will. They're really hoping, I'm told, that they can get unanimous approval this time, because what happened last time when you just had majority approval is the countries that voted against us didn't do it. So if they can get everyone to sign off on this in the next weeks, this could be, as the Commission says, a new start.
Dave Keating in Brussels, thank you very much for that analysis.